Well, let's now turn to an ethical dilemma for some clergy. Washington State has passed a law requiring clergy to report child abuse told to them during confessions. While clergy have long been mandated to report suspected child abuse, most states have protected clergy from having to share the information from confessions. Roman Catholic bishops and others say this new law violates the First Amendment. Chad, what about this?
I think it's important to understand that the sacrament of confession is really about trying to reconcile the sinner with God and the community. It's not about collecting information for the prosecution. And if the confessant is truly sorry for his sins, the priest can then walk him through proper penance necessary for absolution, which very well might involve the guilty turning himself in to the police. And in this way, the Washington law is actually counterproductive because if priests are required to report crimes heard through confession, then penitents will stop confessing them, and that would then eliminate the opportunity to encourage the guilty to do the right thing. So, you know, there's a lot of reasons I'm opposed to this, but just from a pragmatic reason, that's one.
First, let me say I'm not Catholic, and so, you know, my knowledge of the sacrament and all is quite less than other people here. But first, clergy are considered mandated reporters, although they are given the exceptions. But it should be noted that a number of states already have laws similar to Washington's, and we haven't seen the problems associated with that. So to me, I think this is mostly a moot point, that in fact, you know, we have no evidence that priests have gone and turned people in. At the same time, it would be hard to see an enforcement mechanism, but I would have to say that, you know, my personal view is that yes, as I am a mandated reporter, as a faculty member, I believe that the clergy should be too.
Ben, from your law enforcement background, I'm interested in what your perspective on this is.
Yeah, I'm with Chad. I don't think that they should be mandated to report it. There is an anecdotal story that I can give from Erie, Pennsylvania, where it was around 2018 that a man killed his estranged wife, went to confession, and the priest did call the police. So it does happen. He wasn't mandated to call, but I don't know how you wouldn't. It is a core tenet of the Catholic religion and other religions. And it's not that much different than the attorney-client privilege that is in place, where if you're been charged with murder or anything else, you are not only encouraged to tell the truth to your defense attorney, you have to, that you put them on grounds where they can withdraw as your attorney if you don't tell them the truth. They don't pick up the phone and go, hey, not only did he do this crime that we charged him with, and here's all the evidence that he just disclosed in his confession, but he also has 2 more bodies in his backyard.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, right? You know, like, confession is not a police interrogation. It's not supposed to gather information to prosecute someone. We have the police and the prosecutors for that. And clergy are considered mandated reporters in the majority of states, but there is also the state reserves protections for clergy-penitent relationship, right? And one of the Jesuit, Brian Pham, I think a Jesuit priest, who points out that, you know, you're putting priests in a very impossible situation. You are saying that either you will have jail time, I don't know what the details of the Washington law is, or you will be excommunicated because you are giving up this very sacred aspect of confession. You're ratting someone out who has confessed to you. So I know in the long run, I feel this is kind of a moot point, right? How do you kind of mandate that? Like, how do you enforce a priest? And second, just like, say, when I talk to a psychologist and so on, right? The court can issue a subpoena, right, for my records, and we can go that route, right? And rather than saying that, hey, priest, you must tell me, well, I can subpoena your records and put you under oath to say something. That's very different, right? And then it's a different thing than a priest just going and telling things on a person who is, you know, asking forgiveness.
That excommunication you talk about can only be done by a confession to the Pope himself. So this is no small thing that you're asking the priest to do.
Right.
To Rick's point, I mean, I think most people can kind of understand the sanctity of marriage and not compelling a spouse to testify against, you know, his or her spouse. you know, in the Catholic faith, both marriage and confession are sacraments. And so you can kind of think of these as similar. This mandated reporting thing that we're talking about, this is only within the seal of confession. If I go in, you know, and pass the priest on the street and say, oh, by the way, let me tell you about what I did last weekend.
So if I go into
that's a
confession
different
and I
thing.
say, I've done this and I'm going to continue doing this?
Ah, good question. Okay, so if Anirban were to go into confession and say, I am tired of Chad's sinner right policies, I am going to murder him and there's nothing you can do to stop me, the priest would be compelled to call the police and say,
Good enough then.
Chad is under imminent threat, do something about it. But he can do that in a non-specific way to get protection for me to prevent another evil from happening. Officer Ben would then say, oh, it's clearly Anirban.
Well, and it's a great example back to the eerie anecdotal story is the priest was worried that he was also going to kill himself because he was there to confess, and then the priest was under the impression that he was then going to kill himself. So that's a really great example.
For the record, I'm a
The priest
non-violent
was,
person.
not the priest was going to kill
Not
himself.
the priest, no, sorry.
The confessor was going to kill
yes,
himself.
the defendant.
All right, well,
yeah.
child abuse is a horrific crime, and I think this is an interesting ethical dilemma.